Right. Hello. Happy Friday. As usual, I will wait a few moments to give people time to join before I start speaking. If anyone is watching, I hope you're well. Thank you for joining. Happy Friday. Right. Oh, Marie, hello. Our first 40 up to 14 already. Great. People starting to join. Hello, and thank you for joining. You just missed a good solid minute of abject terror then, because for some reason I couldn't actually press the go live button, and I had to kind of minimize the window, move it to the other side of the screen, but we're here now, so that doesn't matter. Hello Patricia, hello Anya, hello William, hello Marie, hello Denise. Who else? Hello Nicole, hello Nicola, hello Paul, hello Sylvia, hello Sarah, hello. Wow, everyone's very prompt. We're already up to 50 in the first 2 minutes, which is unprecedented. That's fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining. I'm joined again by Ellie this week, I believe. Ellie should be popping up in the comments relatively soon. We every Friday we have our own internal demos, which end where like people from different teams show off what they're working on at the moment, and that literally just ends about a minute before I start these. So she's probably scurrying across. But yeah, she had so much fun joining in last weekend. Oh, hello, Phoebe from BBC Midlands. Wow, hello, Phoebe. Thank you very much for joining. Hello, Jackie. Hello, Patricia. I'll sit and wait for me. That's very good of you. And there is Ellie. Hello, Ellie. Thank you, everybody. Well, what are we talking about today? Well, it's quite a wide and broad subject. And I actually think it's something I haven't really talked about on here before, mainly probably because it's much bigger than just Findmypast. So the topic is church records, and by that I don't just mean parish records, Anglican parish records. I mean all denominations. Whether there's so many. I'll talk about that in a second. And I mean all the different kinds of church records that are out there, and not just baptisms, marriage, and burials. You've got other kinds as well, and how they can be used for research, and a little bit of the history around them. But mainly, I was just hoping some of you guys could share any observations you've noticed during your time searching these records, any tips, tricks, any unusual discoveries. I'll be sharing some of those at the end, because obviously parish records are handwritten. Well, the old ones are. Well, they're all handwritten, but especially the old I can't remember the date when they became more uniform, but the early parish records, which are literally just the priest noting down on a paper. Sometimes you find some really weird and wonderful things in there, and I will share some of those with you very shortly. Oh, Sylvia's saying, found a great Catholic baptism this week, which helped me take back a generation. Well, yes, that's the main reason I actually wanted to discuss this, because with it being Friday, obviously we've added new records, and today's update, not so good if your ancestors are solely in the UK, but we can't release stuff every week that suits everybody. There's so many different places people are looking to trace their roots back to, or so many different things they're looking to discover. Obviously, each week's different, and some weeks the records for you, others they're not. But this week is particularly good if you have Catholic ancestors in the US, because today we have made a big old update to our collection of Cincinnati Roman Catholic parish records, and it's actually probably a lot bigger than it seemed in the email and the blog, because as well as adding all the new additions, we've actually also added images for the entire collection as well. So I think we launched the Cincinnati Catholic Records in Roots Text. That would have been February this year. And they went live with just transcripts, but now you can look at the originals in all their glory. So yeah, as we've added new Catholic records to the site, I thought we'd just talk about all kinds of church records. And while I said I'm not focusing on parish records today, because that's ground we've covered a lot, and all you guys are pretty serious researchers, so you're already looking in parish records and you know how they work and you know what you'll find and you know where to look for them and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I just thought we'd cast the net wider and talk about other kinds. But very quickly, I will just tell you a little bit about the records we've added today. So as I said, it's over 644,000 new Catholic records that we have released in partnership with the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, one of our beloved partners. So we've basically, rather than adding records to any specific region, we've just kind of sprinkled these new additions across the whole Archdiocese, really. And it's a big collection. It covers 103 parishes, and that's baptisms, marriages, burials, and congregational records that span the years 1800 to 1979. Sorry, that'd be weird if they were back in time, wouldn't it? But the reason these are so interesting and so useful, even if you don't think your ancestors settled in Cincinnati, is because in the 1850s, Cincinnati was still growing. It was the 5th largest city in the United States, but it was its location that made it so significant. So its location on the banks of the Ohio River made it a really popular stopping off point for immigrants and pioneers traveling west. That really fascinating period of American history where, pioneers and wagon trains were, heading west in vast numbers into, they say unclaimed territory, but essentially the wilderness, to set up homesteads and settle and kind of expand push the American frontier further and further and further west. So for that reason, you've got loads of overland migrants who would have stopped off in Cincinnati or stopped off in Ohio on their way out west, and many of these people a significant portion of these people will have stuck around long enough to leave behind a sacramental record. So they may have got married while they stopped off, they may have given birth to children, and given how dangerous overland migration was in mid-1800s America, quite a few of them probably died there as well, while intending to go further west and establish homes for themselves. And given the fact that America is such a fascinating mix of different cultures, a lot of the Catholics you'll find in these records are from all parts of Europe. You'll find German Catholics, Irish Catholics, Italian Catholics, Polish Catholics, Catholics from all over Eastern Europe. So it's quite a diverse bunch of records, even though it does cover one geographic location in the United States. So yeah, we're really pleased to have added these, and it also gives me another opportunity to talk about the Catholic Heritage Archive, which I will do in a second. I promise it won't be too much of a sales pitch, but it's a big jewel in our crown, I should say. We're very proud of our Catholic records because it was a big coup for us getting them online. Because at the end of the day, the Catholic Church do hold some of the best preserved genealogical records in existence. And prior to us embarking on this kind of Catholic Heritage Archive project, they were really hard to access. Very, very few of them are online. I think virtually none of them are online. And the only way you could actually access them was by physically visiting the church and asking the priest if you could view these records, and it would be totally down to his discretion. And apparently, I've heard stories that it would depend on the kind of priest you had. If you kind of had a young, cool, hip priest, he might be slightly more willing to let you in and have a dig around. But if it was a more traditional, old school priest, they were more likely to say no. So yeah, up until about 2017, when we started adding Catholic records in earnest, these records were really hard to access. And as I said, since that time, we've been doing loads of work and going out and speaking to different archdioceses, building partnerships and bringing their records online. So the Catholic Heritage Archive, today's release is just one of a series of very regular updates. We add to it quite regularly, at least a couple of times a year, and these are big updates as well. And we're still looking to bring new archdioceses on board with us and let convince them to let us digitize their records. So I think the most recent one we did in the UK was Liverpool, which wasn't that long ago. We discussed it at length on here. And obviously, given the rich Catholic history of the city, that was, again, a fantastic addition for us. And we hope it helped a lot of people, because prior to this, you just couldn't access these records online. And not everyone has the time, money, or resources to travel across the country or even get on a plane and cross the Atlantic or wherever you have to go to look at these documents in person. And I guess that's what we're about. We're about making history accessible to everybody from the comfort of their home. Another quick thing I wanted to say about Catholics as well was, I think in the UK and the US, there's definitely a bit of a tendency to underestimate how significant the Catholic populations were. Obviously, for quite a long time in England, Catholics had a rather rough time of it following the formation of the Church of England and Henry VIII parting ways with the Pope, let's just put it that way. But throughout history, it's not fair to say that they had few adherents. I'd say they've always been a significant component of both Britain and the United States' population. I think estimates around roughly around 25% for both countries. That's a lot. And we will continue with this because I guess our lofty aim is to digitize all the Catholic records for North America, Ireland, and the United Kingdom. I think we've pretty much put up all the Catholic records that are available for Ireland. In England, we've got, I think Archdiocese of Westminster, Liverpool, Birmingham. More should be coming. And in the US, there's a few that's growing. There's New York, Philadelphia, more that I can't remember. Oh, I've just remembered in England, I think we have Middlesbrough and Northampton. If you want to find out, actually, I'll just post the link. Let me just get it up now. So if you want to know more about our Catholic collections, this is the place to, this is the place to visit. Something's going very wrong with my screen. Sorry, bear with me. There we go. Got there in the end. Right. So before I carry on waffling on, I'm going to have a look at some of the comments. Kimberly Winter Sullivan, we're from an Irish village and local church records were key to adding more generations to the family tree. Also, distant relative recently passed away and her funeral was held in the same church. Wow. Thank you very much for sharing. That's a great example of why they're so great. Christina Richardson, hello Alex from Melbourne, Australia. Wow, you must be up early. That is very impressive. Thank you for joining us. Is it like 2 a.m. or something there? Anya there, just echoing some of the points people are saying, yes, I was talking to my mum this week, and she said before I was born, she started researching and found the marriage of my great-grandparents. I knew it was because she wasn't Catholic, basically saying Catholic records came in very handy. Michael Anthony Waring said, my family came from Lancaster, which I believe comes under the Diocese of Liverpool. Are the records digitized? Yes, Michael, we digitize them. Let me see if I can find a link to you now. Findmypast, Liverpool Catholics. Actually, I think if you just follow the link I posted before, that should get you there eventually. Actually, what I will also do, if anyone is new to these videos, a tip I always like to share is our A to Z of records set search. Most of you probably know about this already, but it really is the roadmap to our entire site. If you want to find out what we have, just follow the link I popped there, type in a subject, a place, a record type, and it'll come back with what's up there. So if you type in Liverpool Catholic, it will bring you up all the Liverpool Catholic sets we currently have up on site. So let's see some of the other comments. Crispy Bacon said, I don't have relatives from Cincinnati, but Google says that 60% of America lives within half a day's drive. Wow. Denise, oops, got here late, but better late than never. That's just great you're here. Audrey, how are you doing? Hi, Audrey. I missed last week because I was on the way home from teaching at King's College summer weekend family history course. Oh, that sounds good. I'd like him. I didn't. I think I've heard of that. Feel free to tell us more. That sounds very interesting. Nice to be back. It's nice to have you back. Crispy bacon. They call Cincinnati the Paris of America. I prefer Paris. I can't comment because I've never been to Cincinnati. I would love to visit. But yeah, so what was I saying? I've completely lost my place. Let me just get at what I was looking at there. That's it. I was waffling on about how great our Catholic collections are and why you should all search them. But yeah, just to reiterate what we've added this week, if you are watching for the first time, I didn't even do my usual intro. If you are watching for the first time, we do these every single Friday where we just have a chat about what's going on behind the scenes at Findmypast. But it's more an opportunity for people to join the conversation and meet other family history enthusiasts, share discoveries, tips, research advice, all that kind of thing. But yes, every single Friday we do release new records, and just recapping if you're joining late, and this week is Cincinnati Catholic. So we've got about 182,000 new marriages, about 297,000 baptisms, 183,000 parish burials, and a load of congregational records as well, which are things like confirmation registers, that kind of thing. But we'll talk a little bit about that more in a second. Right. So, church records. Back to church records. What is a church record? Well, obviously parish records form a big part of them. Baptisms or christenings, marriages or banns, burials. But then there are also church membership records or congregational records. So these are things like confirmations, letters of transfers. You might find church censuses, which can be great early census substitutes. Sunday school lists, financial records, lists of donations and endowments, things like that, proclamations, membership lists. The list goes on, and there are a selection of these available on Findmypast, and many more available all over the internet. So yeah, I thought I'd just talk a little bit about the different kinds of denominations and the records that come with them and how you'd go about researching them. In the UK and Ireland, I didn't prepare too much on the US, but just as with British and Irish genealogy, church records obviously play a huge part. And as I mentioned before, the United States is a country made up of immigrants of all different backgrounds and religions. And for that reason, finding out what kind of church or ancestor worshipped within the United States can be a big part of the challenge when you're getting started. So if you've got no idea what would be a good way about going around this, try and learn a bit about family traditions, maybe family stories being passed down. If you found any pictures of your ancestors with a church in the background, is there a family Bible you could interrogate? Have you found anything in an ancestor's marriage record to see if they were married by a minister of the gospel or something like that? Any clues you can find from speaking to relatives or just family stories that are passed down might give you a bit of a clue about the religious affiliations of your ancestors. National origins as well, that can play a big part to providing you clues. Depending on which country your ancestor came from, that can give you a strong indication of at least where to start looking. For example, if your ancestors came from Italy, there's a high chance they were Catholics. Same with Irish immigrants. That's not always going to be the case, but it can at least give you a starting point to look. Also, it might also, so I'm just going to drink of water. It might also be worth doing a little bit of investigation into the area your ancestors settled in to find out what churches were actually available to them. Obviously, people were a lot more religious in the further back we go than they are today. So they may have attended a local church purely because of its proximity, even though they were members of a completely different church. But then again, on the other hand, your ancestor might have been very devout. Their certain church and travelled some distance. So you've also got to bear that in mind. Basically saying it's not easy. And again, another thing to bear in mind as well is there's also a possibility your ancestor might have started out with one church and then converted to another. But yeah, my only tip here would be look at county histories and directories. Percy is a fantastic place to do a little bit of digging around the histories of specific counties or areas. That could give you some fantastic clues. So yeah, apart from family traditions, countries of origin, local research, what else could you do? You could see if you could find an obituary in newspapers. We've got a pretty good collection of American newspapers on site. Funeral notices, that might give you an idea of where the funeral took place, which again in turn might tell you what kind of church conducted the funeral. So yeah, lots to try. And hopefully trying a few of those will point you in the right directions. So let's see what people are saying. Anya's saying lots of sad news this week. A leak in Register House in Edinburgh has ruined some of the records, and a flood in the National Archives in Luxembourg. Terribly sad. That's why digitization is so important. And Miko, who I believe might even be watching actually, does great efforts up in Scotland getting Scottish records digitized. So I'm sure he already knew about that. Marie has said, regarding records, you prefer... she's saying, regarding you, I don't know what her comments relate, who she's replying to, but she said, regarding records, you prefer the US Parisian parish records were mostly destroyed in the 1870s. Oh, wow, there's a reconstruction of records, but not complete, sadly. Oh, wow, Marie, why did they do that? That's a terrible tragedy and a loss. And Williamson and floods at Lyme Park, Cheshire. Oh, yeah, is that the one where the helicopters have been brought in or something? May have affected some stuff too, as they hold National Trust's most valuable assets. Oh dear. Cheers. Thanks for the jokes, Chris. We're enjoying them. Nicola Jennings saying, anyone else find Quaker records difficult to understand? Well, I was going to talk about Quaker records in a bit, because I think it was Brian Donovan who very well-known figure in Irish genealogy and an employee of somebody who works for Findmypast and has done loads of getting Irish records online, including Irish Quaker records. And he always says no one kept records like the Quakers. They were meticulous. But if anyone does have any tips for searching Quaker records, please do share them with Nicola. That would be fantastic. And Audrey said, Scottish Catholic records are available elsewhere. Thank you for that, Audrey. But you can only browse them on FMP, which is the only way I was able to find my great-grandfather's baptism. Hint, his mother was economical with the truth. Audrey is a near limitless source of amazing tips, and that wasn't even something I was going to mention today, but because I wasn't going to talk about parish records too much. But yes, browsing is another excellent way of going through and finding those trickier to place Irish ancestors. Those tricky to place just missing ancestors. I was too busy looking at the comments and I distracted myself. Great, just lovely to see everyone sharing tips and talking and just being generally fantastic. So I will carry on with what I was talking about. So yeah, that's my brief bit about the US out of the way. So when we're talking about church records that are not parish records, in the UK, the biggest kind of group of that will be non-conformist church records. And there are a lot of denominations. I believe there's over 60. I think there's around 70 or something different non-conformist denominations in England and Wales, in the UK, England, Wales, and Scotland. And the registers they kept basically vary in size and format. They cover approximately, I think it's fair to say that they cover approximately about 15% of England's population. I think that's generally how the percentage of English people who join non-conformist churches over a large period of history. But obviously in Wales, it's a lot higher. I think 80% of the population were non-conformist or something like that after 1850. And in Scotland, it might even be higher. If anyone knows these facts and wants to correct me, do feel free to pop them in the comments. But what is a non-conformist church, you may be asking? Well, basically, a non-conformist church was any church that disagreed with the Church of England. Anglican. They may disagree for a number of reasons. It might be rights of worship. They may have been opposed to its authority. They may have objected to it being heavily supported or subsidized by the government, which it was. And as I said, there's loads of different denominations, but the better known groups are ones you've probably all heard of. Things like Independents, also known as Congregationalists. You've got your Baptists, your Presbyterians, Methodists, Roman Catholics fall under this as well. Quakers, Society of Friends, you can also call them. You've got Brethren Church, Huguenots, lot. Jews can fall under this category as well, in the sense of records. I mean, apart from the Huguenots that were established in the 16th century and have a very fascinating history, I could probably do a whole other broadcast on Huguenots. The others were pretty much started popping up around the 18th and 19th centuries. If you want to start exploring nonconformist registers, and this is very general, I'm not talking specifically about Findmypast, it's about being helpful to all. Very, very, very few registers exist before 1700, and this was largely because of religious persecution, which is a bit of a constant throughout history, I think, isn't it? By the late 1700s, early 1800s, I think many denominations had actually started keeping registers, and of course they were all different. They were run differently, and some were much better at keeping them than others. Many of these nonconformist denominations did not have strict formal hierarchies in the same way that the Anglican and Catholic churches do. So records were generally kept on quite a local level, really. I do think that's fair to say, but again, there were some outliers. There were some denominations that did form central registers, and I think that includes ones like the Presbyterians, Baptists. I think the Congregationalists did as well. I hope I'm not getting any of this wrong. I did a lot of speedy learning about this morning, so do excuse any errors I may make. But of course, a lot of these nonconformists you will find in Anglican parish registers as well. In fact, that probably might be the first place you do come across them. Because, of course, many baptisms, marriages and burials were recorded in Anglican registers. I think so. Between 1695 and 1705, Anglican ministers were required by law to register the birth of any children in their parish who were not baptized. Although I think quite a few ministers did ignore this, quite a lot of nonconformist births were actually recorded this way. So you may well find them in Anglican parish records. In 1754, there was another change to the law, which meant that by law, all marriages, regardless of dominant denomination, had to take place in Anglican churches. So again, after 1754, you will 1754, you will also find them in many of the parish registers you can find on Findmypast. And of course, many nonconformists were also buried in Anglican churchyards because there weren't really many other burial grounds until the 1850s, when civil cemeteries started to become a thing and were opened all over the country. And so you may find duplication. Sometimes you'll find, about to sneeze, nonconformist baptism, marriage and burials. You'll find them in nonconformist registers and Anglican registers. So in those cases, it's probably worth having a look at both to compare and contrast. And Huguenots, which were, I must add, they were also a Protestant church. They were assimilated. They assimilated very well into English society after just a few generations. I mean, they did get a head start. They did get here rather early from France. A great place to check out is the Huguenot Society of Great Britain. I've got a link to that. I will post in the comments in a little bit because I did have some more things. I had some tips for Huguenot research I wanted to impart, but I'll see how I get on for time. Final thing I'll say on nonconformist registers, just if you are hoping to dig some out, is quite a lot of them have been preserved. The extent to which how many are online, I'd need to do a bit of checking, but there was a law passed in 1836, another good law for family historians, that required nonconformist groups to send their registers through to the General Register Office. And I think don't know if they all complied with that. Some might not have done. And of course, then in 1857, you've got additional records that were turned over to the Registrar General, so you can find them in our GRO records. So that was my kind of muddled summary of nonconformist registers. Some of this was new knowledge to me, so I hope it made sense and I hope it was useful. I'll have another look at the comments, what people are saying. Wesleyans, yeah, I can't forget the Wesleyans. Thanks, Marie. Thanks for reminding me. Chris with the jokes again. Anya saying the Church of Scotland is Presbyterian, so a bit different from Anglican. I have Presbyterian minister in my tree. That's the thing. Ancestors who were ministers. I think I've seen some guides about that, actually. Tricks for finding your clergyman ancestors. And I haven't actually planned to discuss that today, but if anyone does have any tips for searching for clergymen, do share them. So she says, I have a Presbyterian minister in my tree. I contacted the church in Kirkcaldy and now have his signature from the 1770s. He ended up working in Soho, London, before having a disagreement and ending up in Cranshaws and Berwickshire a couple of years before 1800 turn of the century. Wow, fascinating. Chris Bacon said, I just searched for Huguenot in the records. There was no Huguenot there. You should write for Christmas crackers, Chris. I'm loving these. What religion was Huguenot? Give me a tickle. I'm glad. So I'm glad what I'm saying made sense. So Kelly's saying that makes sense to me now, Alex. A few of my ancestors were baptized in a non-conformist and Anglican church. Well, there you go. You can thank some of the stringent laws passed in this country over the past to keep a close track on the population, mainly for tax reasons. I guess, well, no one likes paying tax. One of the positive historical side effects is that we have all this fantastic legacy of record keeping, which can be traced all the way back to government ministers trying to know exactly who was where, what they were doing, and how much they could pay. And actually, yeah. So I guess more of an abstract thought. I guess, yeah. When we're doing genealogy, the vast majority of records we search do fall into two categories, don't we? Government and church. Obviously, there are other types, and I guess these links of taxation to church records. I'm thinking out loud here. I should stick to my planned topics. Cheers, Chris. Saying I should be on the telly. I kind of am already with this, I guess. So Sylvia's saying, my husband's grandmother was baptized as a baby, and again 20 years later as an adult at a mission. Oh, wow. And yes, as Ali has said, our community members literally are the best. They are the best. You are the best. So what was I saying before I got distracted by all your wonderful comments and humorous jokes? So yeah, I did a brief run over the kind of history of nonconformism and registers and the various kind of time periods where the laws changed and what that meant for record keeping. But yeah, looking slightly, I say further afield, it's not really that further afield, but the situation's a little bit different in Ireland. Obviously, in Ireland, the vast majority were Roman Catholics, and we're very pleased to have a lot of the surviving Catholic records up on Findmypast as part of our Catholic Heritage Archive. I believe those were the first to go up, courtesy of Brian Donovan and the amazing partnerships he was able to forge. But yeah, as I was saying, the vast majority of Irish people were Roman Catholic, but not all were, especially in Northern Ireland, where you had large numbers of Scottish Presbyterians who were planted there by James I in the 17th century. Yes, it was the 17th century. And this was done, you probably know this already, but this was done intentionally to supplant the native Irish and reduce the threat of rebellion to English rule, with far-reaching historical consequences. And therefore, the Presbyterian Church was established in Ireland as well. So the Methodists started arriving, I think, in around 1747, when John Wesley visited the country and founded his movement there. There were also Quakers practicing in Ireland from the 17th century onwards. And obviously, while Catholicism was the most the religion with the most amount of followers. The established church in Ireland was the Church of Ireland, and it remained so until 1870. So the survival of church records in Ireland pretty much depends on which church your ancestor also belonged to. And also another thing to mention as well is Ireland had two parish systems, one for the Catholic Church and another for the Church of Ireland. So obviously you'll need to figure out which church your ancestor was a part of before you start digging for them in religious records. Another thing to notice about Catholic records in Ireland is if you're searching our Irish Catholic collection, you may notice that they don't go back quite as far as some of the others. And that's because even though it was the main religion in Ireland, it suffered severe restrictions from the 16th all the way up to the 19th century, which is why the Church of Ireland was the established church. It was because of these religious restrictions. And for this reason, many Catholic churches were actually reluctant to keep registers, keep lists of all their followers. That makes perfect sense when you think about the historical context. So for that reason, Catholic sacramental registers in Ireland that predate the early 19th century are harder to come by. I mean, there are some records from the 17th century for parts of the country. I think Waterford and Galway do have some, but apart from that, there's not that much out there, which another reason why Irish research can be so tricky. And that's extra annoying because given the destruction of so many Irish records and the fact that so many were lost to history, church records are very important for Irish research. So in general, I believe the earliest parish records you'll find in Ireland will be from the eastern part of the country, which is, again, it's where the most prosperous and Anglicanized parts of the country were during that period. Again, it all ties back into this history of religious persecution. But on the other hand, records for the poorest parts of Ireland, which is the western part of Ireland and Northern Ireland, they will probably only really begin in the 19th century because these are the areas that saw the worst effects of the famine and, as a consequence, large-scale emigration. So these are all things to consider when you're digging for your Irish ancestors. I think that's why so many people, I wonder if that's why so many people find Irish family history so rewarding, because it just can be so challenging. It's possible, but it's very challenging. Church of Ireland records obviously are in a lot better state. It was the established church until 1870. So from about 1634 onwards, these records I think were kept pretty well and have survived pretty well as well. They are available online. I think Peroni is an excellent place to go digging for them. And then after the disestablishment of the church in 1870, the registers, these registers were deemed to be of public records, which is why you'll find them on Peroni, which is the Public Record Office of Ireland's website. I think almost half of the country's registers were kept there by 1922, and then the fire that year meant that all the records deposited there were lost, but there are copies. So it's these copies that you will be relying on when you're searching with the Public Record Office. There you go. So that's, again, my very rapid history of Irish church records. Surviving records can be found in a number of places, as I said. I think we do have some on Findmypast. Check out our A to Z of records. We've got very good coverage for Catholics. But if you're looking for Church of Ireland, you may need to check out some other sites as well if you're really serious about getting further back with your tree. And same goes for Presbyterians. If you're looking for Presbyterians in Ireland, there's a very good website. I made a note of the link here. Presbyterian History Ireland, which is where I was discovering some of this information from earlier this morning. I will pop it in the comments. Sorry, I've got to do this bizarre thing with the window that I make it smaller so I can post comments because something seems to be up with my laptop. There you go. If you're... Oh, no, that's the wrong... Oh, dear, that's the wrong button. There you go. I very accidentally ended the broadcast there because I thought I was posting the link. So Lincoln said, I'm finding most of my Romany ancestors were baptized just before they got married. So sometimes it's not matching birthplaces. Grrr. Oh, ancestors it can be very tricky like that. I'm glad Chris Bacon's had fun. He said, I have to go to Lidl. I'll come again soon. This was really fun. I've thoroughly enjoyed it too. So I hope we do see you back here. The jokes have been great. So William Store said, ages ago, when I tracked down a brother of my grandfather, we wrote to the family at the address, and another relative wrote to a newspaper in the area, and we both heard at a similar time from his eldest son. Sadly, his father died before we were reunited with that side of the family. It's such a shame. It looks like people are comparing notes. Oh, yes, Amanda and Reed, very good point. Huguenots were in Ireland too. I should not have missed them off. Oh, that's a good question. Anya said, was the plantation into Ulster to do with moving the Reivers out of the borders too? It's not a time period I'm too familiar with. Actually, yeah, that's a good point. I find the history of the Reivers fascinating. I've got no idea. If an interesting thing to actually, I'm going to see if I can find these now. Findmypast early. I know this isn't related to church records, but an amazing collection we have of. I'm just trying to find them. Findmypast. Sorry, bear with me. I'm searching live, A to Z. But basically, what I'm trying to find out is what we're trying to dig out is we've got this amazing collection of really early Irish maps that were created for King James to assist with the plantation of Ireland. So they were made by English map makers who were sent over there. Maps. I think this is it. Do you know what? I can't find them in the A to Z, so I'm going to have to come back and pop them in later because they're really amazing. They're these beautifully illustrated early Irish maps that have got things like sea monsters coming out the sea and ships in the harbour firing cannonballs. And again, talking more about plantation of Ireland rather than church records, but the whole history, that's fascinating because I think some of the map makers were actually killed because the local population knew very well what they were doing. They knew what was going to follow, and they weren't too pleased about these English map makers roaming the countryside, assisting the plantation. And yeah, some of the maps in the collection were created by at least one guy who was captured by a mob and beheaded. But yeah, they're very interesting. And I will pop a link to those once this broadcast is over. Nicole has said, as much as I love church records, I hate how the transcriber would spell names on records. The amount of times I've looked for someone and they've misspelt the names because of how the name was sounded. Yes, yeah, that's very true. Variations in spelling, mistranscription is a very common thing you need to deal with. Wildcards are handy, so yeah, just go in with a very open mind. Search broad, narrow down as you go along, and that should help. Very quickly before I share some weird and wacky finds that Miko dug out from our parish record collection, quick note on Huguenots, or Huguenot, as Chris was saying. So Huguenots play a huge part in British history. A fact I learned today, and I did not know this, was it's estimated that 1 in 4 British people have a Huguenot ancestor somewhere in their family tree, and most people will be completely unaware of this, but it can be a really exciting family history gem to uncover because it directly attaches your family tree to a really interesting period of history. So if I'm pretty certain you all know who Huguenots are, but if you don't, basically it was actually a term of abuse that was applied to French Protestants. For much of the second half of the 16th century, France was embroiled in, let's just say, some less than pleasant wars of religion. There were some rather nasty massacres. Being a Protestant in France was not a safe thing to be. And despite the fact a peace of sorts was founded in around 1598 when the Edict of Nantes gave French Protestants a degree of protection, it still wasn't safe. And then in 1685, this degree was completely revoked, and over the next century or so, I honestly mean huge numbers of French Protestants fled persecution, and many of them, understandably, ended up in Britain, which was at that time a Protestant country. It's estimated that hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them arrived. They are scattered all over Europe and beyond. And yeah, it's just a fascinating thing. So there are some indicators. If you have a suspiciously French sounding surname, that could be an indicator. But again, it could just be a name. Your Huguenot family name could be lost somewhere further back in your tree. If you've got so for example, I was told by my grandfather before he died that he'd heard that we had Huguenot ancestors that originally arrived in Scotland and then gradually through the decades or centuries moved further down and ended up in Liverpool. I haven't been able to prove this yet, so this is this is a project for me. This is something I'm going to be doing myself. And again, I haven't found any clues yet. I haven't found any French-sounding names. So if you are looking to find Huguenot ancestors, I guess the first thing to do would be to kind of build a genealogical platform on which does that make sense? A genealogical base for your Huguenot ancestors to stand on, and then you can prove the links every stage. So classic clues like names, occupations, communities, they'll turn up in census returns. You may find them in certificates. Names were anglicised over time, another thing just to bear in mind. But for example, so Spitalfields in East London, that was an area that was well known for having large clusters of Huguenots living there. And they brought over with them a classic Huguenot occupation, which was silk weaving. So if your ancestor, say in the 1840 census, was living in Spitalfields and was a silk weaver, chances are they could well be a Huguenot. So I had difficulty getting that out there. And then if you want to pursue that further, it's very likely that this is going to take you into the realms of parish record research, and you're just going to have to keep following the line until you find more clues, more French-sounding names. And once you're satisfied, you've gathered everything, and you've done as much grounded work as possible, it is time to try and firmly establish this Huguenot link. As I said before, the Huguenot Society Library in London is an excellent place to start. It contains all kinds of records related. So, for example, charity records for Huguenot schools, hospital records, family pedigrees, more. So you're thinking, how will these help? So, for example, there was a French hospital in London which only accepted patients who could prove Huguenot ancestry, and I believe the library holds records for that hospital. So if you find your ancestor in the hospital records, they had to prove they were Huguenot, they had Huguenot ancestry to get in. So you would have found that. And if you're lucky, you may be able to find the first ancestor to arrive in Britain, and then that might take your research over to France. There you go. I mean, it's tricky. It's a hard task, but it should be fascinating and enjoyable. Just great to see everyone talking to each other. Michelle Hunter said, my husband's Huguenot ancestors changed their name to a more anglicised version. Yeah, great example. It happened a lot. Jacqueline Dawson said, my 4 times great-grandfather was born in France in 1805, married in Dundee, Scotland, 1832. I have had difficulty trying to find out anything about his French roots family. I don't know if he was Huguenot. Born, I guess, probably a bit later than a lot of the Huguenot migration, but it's very plausible that he was indeed a Huguenot or Protestant. If anyone watching or in the comments has any suggestions for Jacqueline, I'm looking at you, Marie. She beat me to it. And then in France, tried to find out where surnames were preeminent and tried to narrow down the region. Already done it. Marie, you're amazing. Thanks so much. Sorry, I'm just smiling because I just enjoy looking through the comments. Oh yeah, I can't leave off Quakers. What was I going to say about Quakers? So, as I said before, last but not least, Quakers. Don't forget the Quakers. Quakers have always had a reputation for keeping meticulous records, as I said. It was this that actually led to them being exempt from the Clandestine Marriage Act of 1753, which mandated that all the other denominations be kept in Church of England parish records, because they were so good at keeping their own records. The English government and Anglican Church were like, no, you guys are fine. Keep on doing your own thing. So they started to keep register books from the 1650s. We've got quite a few on Findmypast. I know our Irish collection is very good for Quaker records. But as well as register books, you've got the registers. So register books, I should just explain, they were kept at monthly meetings, and they contained details that were compiled from independent sources of the individual meetings. I think in 1776 they had a bit of an overhaul of their whole registration system and introduced a slightly more systematic way of doing things. So after 1776, that's the year America got independence, isn't it? They overhaul. So you'll find birth records which do start containing date of birth, place of birth, parish and county parents' names. They look a lot more like Anglican parish records. Another thing to remember as well is that Quakers objected to using the names of months derived from heathen gods and goddesses. So months are often referred to in their numeric value and not necessarily by their name. So instead of finding June, which I think is named after Jupiter, it would say, I don't know, like the 6 month so-called June or something like that. It's fascinating little bit of history, that, isn't it? I love that. And I was going to tell you about the history of the Quakers, but I don't think I have time. Because before I go, I really wanted to share with you some of these weird and wacky finds that Miko dug out in our parish records. And so I was actually going to post... where is it? There you go. I was actually going to post images of the records themselves in the comments, not images, links to, but then I realized that not everyone watching necessarily has a subscription to Findmypast. Why is it so called June? Because the Quakers didn't agree with the name June, Chris. That's why. So I'm popping this link to a blog, which is basically weird and wacky finds lifted from Miko Clelland's Twitter, the dapper historian. If you don't follow him on Twitter, you really are missing out. He posts hilarious, amazing, weird and wonderful finds from all over the place all the time, and it's a great source of just family history fun, really. But yeah, the reason I wanted to post the blog rather than images is that if you don't have a subscription to Findmypast, hopefully looking at some of the exciting records Miko has dug out will tempt you to. So some of the ones, so let's have a look at. So in this blog, which is, as I said, weird, quirky finds from Miko's Twitter feed, or records he has found on Findmypast, I should add. He doesn't just look at parish records, he looks at censuses and stuff like that, but I'm just going to skip down to the parish record section because I wanted to reinforce what I said at the start. A lot of these really early parish records contain some wonderful notes and just nuggets of history that you really wouldn't expect. So this one here, this is from a 1576 parish register, and Miko said, perhaps the most touching marriage ceremony I've ever read. A truly beautiful moment, and it really, really is. So basically what it says is, you can see on one side, you've got the beautiful old archaic handwriting. You might need a bit of paleography skills to get through all that, but Miko kindly posted a typed transcript of it as well. So listen to, I love this. This is really, really touching. So it says, 5th of February, 1576, Thomas Tilsey and Ursula Russell were married. And because said Thomas was and is naturally deaf and also dumb, so that the order of the form of marriage used, usually among others which can hear and speak, could not for his part be observed. That said, Thomas for the expressing of his mind, instead of words, of his own accord, used these signs. First, he embraced her with his arms and took her by the hand, put a ring upon her finger, and laid his hand upon her heart, his hand upon his heart, and then upon her heart, and held up his hands towards heaven. And to show his continuance to dwell with her to his life's end, he did it by closing his eyes and with his hands, and digging out the earth with his foot, pulling as though he would ring a bell, with diverse other signs approved. I love that. Isn't that touching? Really beautiful moment from it just shows how I guess people were, we probably don't do some of our ancestors further back credit. We often think that times like that were a lot crueler and a lot harsher. And then you find things like this and you realize people have always been good, and there's always been lovely, wonderful moments like that. I really, really loved that. I think that made my day reading that. Another one here, the one he posted below, this is fantastic. I think this was from our Portsmouth collection. If you there, you will see a bored English priest who left their own mark on the register by drawing a fantastic fetching. It looks like it could be a self-portrait, I'm guessing, based by the wig. And there he's stamped the date on his forehead. That was drawn in 1687. It's just amazing, isn't it? So it reminds us that these were physical living documents that parish priests were writing in and it updating every day. Another one he's got below, a heartwarming entry to a 1700s burial record. It says, this old man had lived 49 years in a little cottage near the seaside. He was 78 years old, and when he was happy, always sang. Love that. But of course, not all of them were particularly nice. There was one parish priest from a parish called Seasalter in Kent who wasn't so nice. We've actually talked about him on before, and most of his parish notes were very offensive. He didn't seem to have the best view of many of his parishioners. So one, for example, says Jacob Whittet and Sarah Kent were shackled at Seasalter Church, and that's quite an upbeat look on it as well. And another one is saying an 1812 baptism of Hannah starting as she means to go on, and already so he listed her as the headache rather than the child of Philip and Sarah Tabor, I think. But based on some of the others I've seen from those registers, those are pretty tame. He was he was much more rude about some of his other parishioners. We'll have to get a blog about that. But yeah, if you do want to read the rude parish records, they're from Seasalter, the parish of Seasalter. And you want to be looking around the 1730s. So there you go. I think as it's 6 o'clock, I should probably let you all get on with your weekends. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope today wasn't a little muddled. It probably wasn't as coherent as I would have liked it to have been. Because as I said, I've been learning about other denominations and their records a lot myself. So quite a lot of this is new to me. Yeah, how romantic. It's lovely, that church entry, isn't it? Yeah, and as I said, if you haven't checked out the blog yet, you can view the original images via the link I posted. Yeah, it's a fantastic blog. And do check out Miko's Twitter as well. It is very, very interesting and entertaining. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for commenting. As always, this has been great fun. William said William's just being an absolute hero and continuing to assist pretty much everybody with their family history. What would we do without you guys? Honestly, the knowledge pool in this comment section is a resource that we're definitely going to want to tap into, which Ellie will be speaking to you about in the future. Sharon, glad you're able to join at all, and hope you enjoy watching it back. But yeah, have wonderful weekends. Yeah, when you get Welsh Catholic records, can you visit them? Bear that in mind on you. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. William is always a hero. Sorry. Have a fantastic, wonderful weekend. Happy ancestor hunting. Have fun, whatever you're doing, whether it's family history or just enjoying the sunshine, if there is any. And I will see you again next Friday. So, bye-bye. Whitstable Carnival. Wish I was there. And I missed the Oyster Festival last week as well. I'll have to get down soon, and next time I am down there, so I'll have to try and meet you for a drink. But yes, so happy Friday, everybody. Enjoy your weekends, and I shall see you next Friday. Bye-bye.